All right. So, JD, I'm going to have you just introduce yourself real quick before
Oh,
we
okay.
jump into a juicy conversation.
All right. I'm JD Daniels. I'm from Illinois.
Wonderful. Okay. So, JD has a lot of life experience, and I'll just share that later. But we just want to jump into a really great conversation because I just from the little time I spent with him so far, it's very easeful to dive into very different portals and rabbit holes. So let's just start with just the medical profession in general. And I'd love to hear you pick up a story that you're initiating with three sisters and identity and how maybe let's just see where this conversation goes into medicine, identity, humanity, whatever. Go ahead and you have the
Yeah.
floor.
Yeah. So, the three sisters basically supported the people and they did it different ways. The different tribes planted and harvested different, they all kind of used it. And it was sort of not just nourished them physically, but it was sort of an emotional and sort of spiritual thing. So, first sister's corn, okay, grows tall. She's planted and she's the scaffolding.
Mm,
Okay. Second
yep.
sister is squash, and squash is painted below, and squash spreads out and shares.
Yeah.
And then beans, third sister, she connected everyone. She was down on the ground with the squash, and she grew up as a scaffolding to the
Mm,
corn,
mm,
and kind of connected them both and made nitrogen. In allopathic medicine, we have three baskets. The first basket is corn, and corn is our, how should I say it, um, technical side. So it's
mm,
the part where we do procedural things. And that's sort of generally what has supported us. So if you are in a really bad car wreck and you have a shattered femur and this stuff, we're not bad at it. Okay.
mm.
Something like big like that. You got a bad heart and it's not going to work and you need a new one. We can kind of give you a new one and it works pretty good. And that took a lot of time and everything. And the corn takes a lot out of the soil and it grows and it's a
Hmm.
scaffolding.
Yeah.
Okay. The second basket is day to day stuff or kind of what we call chronic disease. And that's where you go when you have asthma or you have high blood pressure or you have depression or you have something like that. That correlates what we call primary care, which basically means that when you get ill, that's the first person you go to. They work differently. When you go to procedural, when you go through corn, we look at you with a high powered microscope with bright lights. We use a lot of technology, and by the end of the day, we have you cured. Okay, with you can't do that with primary care. The difference is I know you, but I know you in a different way. So it's like a video that I've taken of you over the years.
Mm.
And sometimes it's very sharp and I see what's going on. Sometimes it's blurry, but I also see in the background your family and I get like a totally different view. The third sister, or I kind of went out of a thing here, but the squash is public health. And
Mm.
public health basically goes out and spreads out and it kind of supports the whole thing. And that's been sort of like totally ignored. And it's kind of the base because what happens is we have focused on end of process, what we call tertiary care. So the first time somebody might come in and come into our health system is when they have a heart attack in the emergency room. Wouldn't it have been better if maybe in their 30s they would have been checked and had their blood pressure would have been taken care of? Or wouldn't it have even better when they were a kid that when they were having issues that was stressing them out and was going to cause them anxiety in their middle age and cause the high blood pressure?
Mm.
Maybe if we would have looked at that. So
Mm.
many wisdom traditions,
Mm.
and we all use these terms, so I'm going to just sort of define them for me. I try to define a culture as precisely as I can. So if I know a tribe or something, I'm going to use that word.
Yeah.
And when we talk about the people that were America before European influence, a bunch of words have been used and stuff like that. But right now, I'm using the word American Indian, which is kind of like calling an Irishman and an Italian Europeans. They're in the same thing. Okay. So when we do this, all these cultures sort of look at things sort of different. We have to kind of take that into account when we're interpreting this. So what happened in our country is that we were basically a patchwork of cultures over dominated by Northern European.
Mm-hmm.
So we're our culture, our religion was the only religion in mankind that ever said that Mother Earth isn't what heals us, and we don't follow. We're not following women. We said that Eve made a sin and pulled us out of the garden, us men,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of like corn.
Okay.
Okay. And
Okay.
right now, our culture and our medical care, and I would even go as far as our environment, they're all linked and they've all been going. And so we've gone through this very relatively short time when you look at history with rapid growth.
Mm-hmm.
So in a couple of 100 years, the whole face of this North American continent has drastically changed. And it's been because of this rapid growth. And you can use it from a different culture. You can go yin and yang, you can go all kinds of things, but it's sort of the same type of thing.
Yeah.
And we're in a change now that it's not going to work. We have to start looking at the other parts of the system. And in medicine right now, what the way most people interact with medicine is in the chronic disease stuff. You get this episodical thing where someone gets hurt, but in general, the average person, unless they're in a car wreck or toward the end of their life, they have to do this, and it's been broken up. So right now, I want anyone listening to think of how they take care of themselves in their health care. So if they're doing this like a general allopathic, they used to have a doctor that they identified with and they sort of took care of them. Now they have a doctor that they get either by their insurance or gets picked or whatever. Usually can't get into them because there aren't enough of them. So when they get sick, they go to an urgent care or something like that. And they may see a different person. In fact, if they go to that place enough, that might be the one they identify with.
Mm.
Then if they have something that needs to be done or some medicine, they go to their primary doctor who they don't get to see very much. They don't have this relationship. Okay. Then if they become ill in the hospital, they have 4 or 5 doctors. So they have all these doctors and there's no one taking care of them. So some things are done really well. Like we've come a long way with technology. Like there's stuff if you uh, get in a trauma, we can now fix it. Okay, but instead of doing it that way, wouldn't it? What made sense was before we leaned on our public health, and we found out, well, we why is all this trauma happening? Well, there were car wrecks, so we said you got to wear a seatbelt. Okay, that noticed that caused that helped health more than putting the trauma center at every street corner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what's happened is that a lot of people who go into medicine, they they want to be reimbursed. There's nothing wrong with that. But what they really want is they want to do something with the interaction with people and they want to do where they feel they're contributing to society. So they sign up for this dream, okay, but then they go into this corn type of what's the right culture, which is
Yeah,
okay. So
totally.
it's going, but it's not sustainable. And so right now, old people like me are like, whew, I'm done. And so you're seeing too many people leaving the profession much earlier than other generations.
Mm.
So if you're in a uh, let's say you're in a Lakota tribe and you're identified as a medicine person, you're that medicine person until you leave this earth.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
they love it. They're like, and it fits and it all does. And now, people, well, when can I do it? Or I'm looking at my 401k, or I'm looking at this, and when can I kind of stop doing this?
Yeah.
And everyone's sort of sick, and there's no roots. And the second thing that happened is that our species evolved very rapidly and for a very specific thing. A long, long, long time ago, we were literally getting our butts kicked. The other primates were getting to the fruit before ours were. The other
That's
animals were
right. Yeah.
tougher than us. We were going
Yeah.
to like die out.
Yeah.
And then we don't know what happened, but it all happened simultaneously.
Mm.
This front part of our brain exploded, got real big,
Yep.
and it started to use up all this energy. But look at our head compared to other primates. It's smaller.
Mm-hmm.
If we were apes, it would be like this, huge head.
Mm.
What's the difference? They had these huge muscles. So all day they're chewing. What's chewing do? It stimulates your autonomic nervous system. It calms you down.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you have to do chewing all day to get enough calories. We lost this part because it was taken over by the brain, this frontal cortex. And what this did was it allowed us to be much more complex on how we communicated with each other. And it gave us more than just a big advantage. It was like a 15 million fold advantage because, like right now, how if we were unable to sort of just maybe have just maybe 100 words or 100 signals that we can kind of tell each other, I couldn't explain this to you. And we wouldn't even have this technology. So what happened was it allowed us to leapfrog and leapfrog and leapfrog. But there was a problem. Our emotions were unregulated because of the change of our brain. The other thing that happened was how we walked and how we went around. So what happens is that we are built like the whales of the land. What do whales do? They go from one tip of the earth to the other tip of the earth, and they follow a pathway, and that is because of the ocean comes and two different uh, currents come together, and that's where all that energy is at. You get the plankton and all that stuff, and they eat it, and they kind of follow that along.
Mm.
Okay, what we do is we were built to walk about 13 to 15 miles a
Right.
day. And we walked along this little ridge between where two ecosystems hit on a savanna. There were
Mm.
trees and there was a flat place. So all that energy. So we knew all this stuff and we could kind of walk along there and do it. So we would do this. And most of the time we would live in part of our brain that's called the executive function network. And what that is the doing part of the brain, not the thinking part of the brain. And you are mostly you're looking at external stimuli. Okay. And it's fun. Most of the times when you say, when was I doing that? When did you do something that you lost track of time? You sort of enjoyed it. That's how we were built.
Mm.
So we would basically get up in small groups and walk along and do this. And it sounds, wow, this is cool. What happened? Well, there was a couple things that had to happen. One is that by living in this little group, we had resources, food, and we also had sex. And how could large beings sort of hang out like that? So what we had to do was, as the brain grew, this shrunk. Our throat had to change so we could talk and articulate.
Uh-huh.
And so we kind of had a bad deal because your food tube and your air tube are right next to each other. Not a great design. That's what we did. So what we learned to do was sit around in a circle. And the way we could do that, because we could watch each other's back. So the people that were furthest apart in the circle are actually the ones that help each other the most, because I can see behind you and you can see behind me, and
Mm.
we help, and then we talk. And then we had to do something to stimulate our autonomic or unstimulate our autonomic nervous system so we wouldn't fight.
Okay. Yeah.
And we don't chew because we don't have all this.
Yeah.
What do? Dance, sing, tell stories.
Hmm.
Okay. How can you end up being friends with someone you don't like? Easy. Every day, you don't have to say a word to them. Go sit next to them and eat your sandwich next to that person. When you do that without talking, within a few weeks, you will be friends. Okay. So there's this bonding thing that we were supposed to do. Occasionally, there'd be a problem. We'd go along and you'd go, JD, we can't go that way because there's wolves over there. And I'm like, no, Shannon, there's some blueberries we're going to get. And we'd have to sort of like talk. So for a period of time, we had to sort of rise above the savannah and talk and have to like do this abstract type thinking. That's called the default mode network.
Okay.
Okay. And
Yeah.
basically we would do that, but it was a lot of effort. It was stressful, but it would only last for a couple of minutes. I go, you're right. Let's go this way, and we'll get some water, and then tonight we'll come back to the Blueberries. Cool, all right. And then you go back to the other way. So you have, this right and left brain and stuff isn't right. We know a lot more about how our brains work and how everything works now through technology. We've got functional MRI, we have all this stuff. So what happens is that our brain doesn't work right and left. It works up and down, sideways and stuff. And really what makes us us is the different parts of the brain firing in certain ways. So we now think of things as these neural networks.
Mm.
You have three main neural networks that kind of control everything. We talked about the executive function, which is the do, externally motivate or looking at. And then we had the other one, which is the default mode network, and that's like thinking kind of internally.
Mm.
And they can't be going at the same time because they use too much energy, one or the other. So in the middle, you have a moderator called the salence network, which goes clunk, clunk, clunk. It flips back and forth. So what would happen is on a healthy person, we would walk together in small groups. We have the capacity in general to remember easily about 100, 150 things. So when the groups get bigger than that, all these rules start happening and it starts causing issues. But these smaller groups, that's why you have clans and tribes that come together at different times for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
It all worked. You were saying I'm a village, I was saying I'm a village person. That's where you get your like home and you're comfortable and you're safe. Okay. So you have that. But then right now, how do we use that up? It used to be people would like know every plant they were over there. They would know these different pathways. They know how to get food. They were sort of but then we kind of went to, you know, figuring out the wheel and figuring out what a corner of a square was. And that's when we started becoming kind of agrarian and it started kind of going the other way. So what happens is that we have gotten to where the salient network thing gets stuck. So
Mm.
all day you're out. As a modern human, you get more stimulation in 1 week than an ancient human would in their whole life. That's
Yeah.
fast. That's sort of like trying to drink out of a fire hose. It'll knock your teeth out. Okay.
Seems more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're doing this all the time. We're over here on, I got to think. So, all this stuff's happening, all this stress and stuff's going on. And well, what happened with my generation is we weren't quite there yet. We weren't totally corn centric. We had
Right.
some of this other stuff going. So
Yeah.
I was a latchkey kid. So I would get home from school and I had about 2 to 3 hours before my mom got home and my sisters were there and stuff that, the books got thrown on the dining room table and we were out, causing hell and having fun. And
Yeah.
what happened was we learned some stuff that really was more important than what we learned at school because there was some stuff that I didn't want my mom to know. So I knew that I wanted to go to your house because your mom had the best cookies. And I wouldn't go down the road and do this other because this guy older guy, he's in 8th grade and he can kick my butt. So I better stay away from them, And so you learn all these little things, but it was like what we call free play. I would go and do stuff with my friends. It was kind of like back there. And then I'd come home and like this. So we were exposed to that.
Mm.
And when you look at people in my generation, the boomers, it's all like hierarchy. If we get in a little group, we kind of get together, and it's all about this being efficient and being a Chad or a Karen, whatever you guys call us. But the bottom line on it is that we did that, but we also had this other half. So in my neck of the woods, there are the Cardinals and there's the Cubs in baseball. And what would happen on game day, if I was a Cardinal fan and you were a Cub fan, we would razz each other and fight and everything like that. But then as soon as the game was over the next day, we were friends.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, if you never get that chance to do that, you don't know how to, it's hard for you to like handle this conflict without your autonomic nervous system flaring up and taking over things. So people have not been able to practice this. So what's happened is with your generation behind me, you have a lot of advantages. You guys have technology, you've got all this stuff, but you also have some issues where you kind of were, there was a lot more controls on you growing up than
Mm-hmm.
some of there's always exceptions, but in general, where people know now to the point where the kids they all have cell phones and their parents are like tracking them and they know exactly where they're at. It used to be like there were times like my mom on Saturday afternoon, she didn't know, she knew that by 5 I'd ever be home. I was going to be in trouble if I wasn't, but between then she took my word where I was at. So I had to, like, if I was going to get in trouble, I had to fix it myself. And what happened was that I slipped and skinned my knee a lot. But then when I got older, when I slipped, I didn't slip and break my neck. That makes sense. Okay. So this happens. And then the second thing happens is that in a fairly short period of time, the last part of our life span increased. It used to be that when you were 60, we let you stop and get a pension because you were going to die soon. Okay. Not anymore. People are staying in their jobs longer, and the wealth is getting concentrated to the top part of our culture. It's not when I say the top part, I don't mean like the elite. I'm talking about the older part, the older generations. That's where all the wealth is. It's
Mm.
not. It's the wrong way. So this is where you go back to public health. You can tell a lot about a culture and a lot about the health of the folks by looking at these graphs. And all public health, it's egghead stuff. It's looking at statistics, and you got to be careful because you can get messed up. But in general, a healthy population should look like an egg if you put it on a plot graph. It should look kind of
Mm.
egg shaped.
Okay.
Okay. In Japan, a number of years ago, they started having a lot of problems, really about this kind of same stuff we were doing, but they kind of went a different direction. So what happened was that this middle part where the people of childbearing age and like kind of being all the working and stuff, it started to shrink. Okay. If you look at a quote developing country where they don't have a lot of technology, but they've got a lot of people, their populations look like a pyramid. They have lots of young people and not that many old people because when you get older, they don't have the technology to make you live longer, so you die. Okay. So what was starting to happen in Japan was it was shrinking, and the top, so it looked like a kind of a lollipop. First started looking like a phallus,
Yeah.
then a
Yeah.
lollipop. And they said, what's going on here? So they had in the 80s all these folks that were coming in to their doctors and saying, I'm having problems here. And the doctors would run tests, go, we can't find anything. Yeah, but I feel horrible and my joints are swelling and I don't feel good. Well, I don't know. Maybe you're nervous. Okay. So they started doing all this stuff, and they didn't have the F word, fibromyalgia. They didn't have all these words these diagnoses that put people in this that aren't really diagnoses. There's no lab test. It's someone's opinion, and you get put into a pot and treated a certain way. So instead of doing that, what they did is they're kind of analytical. And Japan is kind of cool because it's different from a lot of the other countries on the Pacific Rim. It's most like Scandinavian countries.
Mm.
Scandinavian countries are almost all forested, and their populations are concentrated in large cities, but their culture is very tied to nature, so it's very respectful. That's kind of how Japan is, and they got some wealth. So what they did was they took what they knew with quote Western medicine, and they combined it with their cultural medicine, which I look at our cultural medicine as what you practice,
Mm.
naturopathy. Okay, and what they did was they have Buddhism and Shintoism, and what they did was they combined those and they developed something called Shinrin Yoku.
Mm.
And Shinrin Yoku, you know about it. We won't go into it. But basically, the bottom line on it is that it's a holistic way of treating people. So if you're in Japan and your doctor can't figure out what's up or whatever, they say, okay, we'll give you a prescription, and the government pays. You go on a train to one of the forest hospitals, and it's sort of set up like a little mini Mayo Clinic. Different practitioners evaluate you, look, give you stuff, but you have to stay there a week, and the appointments aren't all day. And what you do is you get taught a form of somatic therapy,
Ah,
okay,
yeah.
which is connected to nature. So what they do is they give you self-resilience skill while you're getting diagnosed. So if they go, well, we don't know if we can fix this, but you then at least have a coping mechanism where we don't teach that. That's why that's what that's what attracted me to the Knight. The conniving thing is Germany's cultural Shinrin Yoku, America's naturopathy. And I got exposed to thinking that way when I worked at the Olympics.
Yeah.
Okay. Because they had this old, I'm an old guy, and the old kind of way of doing things was it was like a training room. Doctor comes in, everybody goes, okay, what do you do? Then the trainer goes, rah, like this, and then they kind of move along. And the athletes didn't like that. It probably wasn't particularly helpful, unless you had like a broken leg, we could fix that. But a lot of the other stuff, you didn't need all this BS. So they kind of turned it around and said, we're going to end up treating the athletes, and that's going to be our primary goal. It's not what we think, it's how we do it. So any athlete that came in that had a problem, they had to be seen by two different practitioners from different disciplines. And you had to talk and come up with a plan together. It wasn't this stuff. Okay. And it worked. The other thing they did is you got these folks that are just unbelievably cool people, and they have put so much work in and they have so much skill. But some of them, there's a lot of pressure because their whole life comes down to like 3 minutes or 2 minutes, and only a couple seconds separate them. And they have to fly all these distances. So you can imagine there's just a little pressure. So I started teaching them stuff. And there were all these, and we use science, and there's all these ways you can calm your nervous system. Now we've studied this long enough that we're going back and going, this is the same stuff that other wisdom traditions have used. We just have a different name to do. So it's the same thing, but it's holistic. Okay. So what I think is going to have to happen is the corn's going to have to die, come back, and then we're going to have to kind of reshape what we do, because I think that our system is the process of deconstructing. Allopathy is trying to lean more and more and more on technology. Right now, we're going through a new dean search. And our medical school is much different than a lot of medical schools. A lot of medical schools, the dean's in a couple, 3 years, does his job, does her job, leaves, another one comes in. We've only had 4 deans the whole history of our whole medical school. They stayed decades. So it's a big thing for us. And what a lot of these folks that are coming in that are interviewing are basically saying that AI is the future. We have to get more efficient and get people through more. And it's like, okay, I'm like, fine, hire them, because it'll just make the corn die quicker and we can start over. Now, you're coming up on this and you're like, well, this is scaring me, JD. What, and correct me here, because I sometimes, but my understanding is that I think it's Mandarin, I'm not sure, but the symbol for danger is very similar or the same for opportunity. It's sort of like the same thing, different sides of the coin. So you are learning things without a lot of technology, which I think is good. And what I saw at your school this weekend was happy people.
Happy people.
Unusual. And the other is connected people.
Mm.
Okay. So what I would say, if you said, JD, what was advice would be keep doing what you're doing, stay connected, and and follow your heart.
Mm,
You are a very fortunate person. You're in the top 1% of the world. You have a fantastic brain. You didn't get here by accident. You are compassionate. You have all these things. You look like you're a muscle builder. You said, no, I just got to show up. And you got all this stuff. So no matter what, you're going to have a marvelous life. Just remember that.
mm,
Are there going to be challenges? Absolutely. Going to be kind of bumps in the road? Absolutely. But you follow your heart, you'll be fine.
mm.